Greetings, I'm John, and you're tuned in to Dr. Hollowed. In tonight's episode, we're going to be taking a look at some creepy experiences of urban explorers. So, kick back, leave a light on, and make sure you're not alone. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button.
There is an abandoned brickyard in my hometown, and I frequently visit it because so many people are interested in urban exploration. Because I am such a fan, people reach out to me to host their first experience at our local brickyard. There is always graffiti, and usually, I can see how recently someone has been there by any new graffiti or finding the spray paint cans scattered around some of the buildings. I went there 6 days ago, and everything was normal. I visited with my girlfriend, and we had a great time. I took a buddy of mine yesterday, and when I showed up to the main complex, I found brand new spray paint littering the walls. It was pro-KKK, pro-white supremacy, and many sayings littered the walls. I found on the ground bricks that were positioned like a cross, and there were ashes all over it as if they had been burned. When I took a closer look, I found the ashes were still hot, and there were embers deep within the holes in the bricks. As I turned around to tell my buddy, we heard a loud bang, and I wasn't sure if it was a gunshot, or a brick that was thrown, because the warehouse we were in echoed really bad. We bolted super fast and ran back down the train tracks towards the car. I've had other scary experiences, but this one is fresh, and I'm still freaked out. Me and my group were exploring an old abandoned trotting park that got shut down in the 1970s because of no AC in the middle of Arizona. Go figure. It's about 6 stories, but on the little service floor between the 6th story and the roof, there was a room to service elevators, mechanical pumps, and whatnot. We found this room, and one of the valves on some kind of pump was just spinning on its own. Now bear with me here, there was only one shady staircase entrance to this place, but the hall past these things got very narrow moving forward and faded into a small black room that we still haven't explored. Well, we were so curious as to what was making these valves spin, as there just couldn't be any power or anything going into them. One of my buddies was messing with some others, spinning them and watching them turn, and then we all slowly realized that the original valve had begun to slow down and now eventually stopped. We just realized that it wasn't spinning on its own, someone had to have spun it. We also realized that the only place they could be was in the room right in front of us. We left that service area and made it to the roof. We never actually saw anyone else there that night. A few more things happened the more we went there. My buddy's car was broken into while we were gone, but those are stories for another day. So in Connecticut, there's an urban legend centered around a road in Easton. The road is called Dracula Drive, but it is legally named Velvet Road. The story of Velvet Road is that there was an insane asylum in the area, and the inhabitants got out and flooded into the woods around the area. The stories say that when they reproduced, their kids came out with large heads and were deemed melon heads. So anyways, I live a town over from this road, and it's common for kids to go there late at night, turn off their lights, and walk down the road. Nothing really ever happens, or so I thought. One night, me and 2 friends decided to go to Dracula Drive. All of us had been there before, and we were just bored, so we went there. We turn off our lights and start walking down the road. Nothing really spooky happened until we walked back. On our way back, we started to hear rustling in the bushes. It was most definitely a deer or something, but we weren't taking chances, so we sprinted back to the car. Then, we're driving away, and we realize the car is kind of wobbling. We pull over and realize we have a flat, but this wasn't normal. The first creepy part is that the tire had a long cut in it, rather than the holes I had seen from other tires popping. Second, if it had popped, we would have heard it, so we started getting sketched out. Then the final sketchy part is that there were handprints on the fender around the popped tire. It's not that creepy, and there's probably an explanation for it, but nonetheless, this was 2 years ago, and I still won't go back. I'm not quite sure if this qualifies, but a friend and I were driving his 4-wheeler down dirt roads. I had just moved to this tiny town of 300, and the 4-wheeler ended up dying or something. It wouldn't work. I was in 4th grade, and this was when mobile phones were starting to develop. We didn't wear shoes, and I didn't bring my phone because we knew we'd be going through water. Anyway, I asked my friend how far we had to walk to get to his house, and he said a few miles. It was about 5 p.m., the sun was going to go down soon, and we were on a dirt road in the middle of the woods with no shoes. We're walking for about 10 minutes when we hear a noise coming from behind us. It sounds like a vehicle, but there's no way because where's it coming from? Well, it's this old, rusty red van, and we flag it down. An older guy pulls over, wearing overalls with long hair and a long beard, and asks what's wrong. We explain, and he tells us to hop in the back. The floorboard in the back is covered with crushed cans, so we had to keep our feet on the seat. I just knew this guy was going to kidnap us because we're in BFE and phones really weren't too common for kids then. We come to the end of the road, and I recognize where we're at. All I'm thinking in my head is please turn left. Thank God, he turns left and takes us home. I assumed he was a harmless man, but he just looked like the kind of kidnapper you see in movies, so it was extremely sketchy. Especially for a 4th and 6th grader who couldn't defend themselves. Good times. 2005-ish, 3 of us snuck out around 2 a.m. to go teepee at a girl's house that had initiated the teepee war a few summer nights before. Separating our neighborhoods was a vast open space filled with trails, bushes, and most notably, a creek that runs directly through the middle. The creek had a small layer of dense trees on each side. On our trek home, we were walking on the path that runs parallel to the creek, about 10 feet up a steep slope from the water. This trail wasn't necessarily abandoned, but it was quite obvious that not a lot of people used it anymore. There were overgrown weeds on the path, and people just generally avoided being down there. We were strolling along when, out of nowhere, a massive blue flash erupted all around us. It didn't seem like it was coming from above us, but more like 1,000 silent flashbangs went off and everything turned bright blue for as far as we could see. I looked at my friends, and they each had their hands over their ears and had closed their eyes. Instead of a loud bang, which would be expected at this moment, there was a sharp ringing in the air. It was comparable to any video game or movie after a grenade goes off and you can't hear anything at first, and then reality slowly starts to come back over the next couple minutes. As if a switch was flipped, the light was lifted, and the deep darkness of the night set in. The bluish light lasted about 15 seconds and was answered with our swift sprint home. It must have been around 2008 while working in London. I used to take a shortcut through Mitre Square, one of the locations of Jack the Ripper's murders. I had a deep fascination with the story growing up, and having the opportunity to walk through it each day interested me greatly. Knowing the history of the murders, I was aware that the anniversary of the death of Catherine Eddowes was approaching. I took the decision to place some flowers on the site of the murder. The next day, as I walked through Mitre Square at around 8 a.m., my attention was caught by a nearby window in a disused building. As I looked in, I noticed a woman brushing her hair in a nightgown. She was lit up by candlelight and smiled at me as I walked past. To this day, it still gives me chills to think about it, but I still believe I saw her spirit smiling back at me. Not so much creepy or horrifying, but still something I remember vividly. My best friend used to live near the woods, and these woods stretched for miles and miles. We would always run around on the trails there but never venture out much further. One day, we said fuck it and decided to walk as far as we could in one direction, so we went and jumped a few fences, through some clearings, over more fences, etc., and rolled up out of the bushes onto this small clearing. The clearing couldn't have been bigger than, like, 25 by 25, it was just a little break from the brush. It was filled with animal bones. And I'm not talking about 1 or 2 animals, it was like a graveyard of murdered animals. We saw femurs, skulls, you name it. Everywhere. They were all over the place, but we were more intrigued than freaked out, so we kept going. We end up reaching an area with clear trails, and we find this locked chest. It was a metal box, it almost looked like a hatch of some sort, but I think it was a metal chest. Anyway, as soon as we see it, we start hearing voices. We duck into the bushes and can see like 3 to 4 people walking around, and they get within 20 to 30 feet of us on the next trail over. Keep in mind that we are really far into the woods at this point, but most likely on someone's property. I waited until the people were in the opposite direction from which we came, looked at my friend, gave each other a nod, and then we proceeded to haul him back to his place. The creepiest part was the animal bones, for sure, but all of it was strange. The hidden bunker at Knox Trailer Park near Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. So, Camp Lejeune, a large Marine military base on the East Coast, has several house areas off of the main base, one being Tarawa Terrace 1, 2, and then tucked back is Knox Park, which seemed to be a large trailer park area. I'm told, not sure if this is true, that this is where the black military members and their families lived during segregated times. Now I think it's all been torn down and houses have been built. This is after September 11th, so all of the side gates and minor gates to the house had been closed off, so you could really only enter legally through the 2 main gates of TT1 or TT2. To get to Knox, you had to go through TT2 on a single road or make a path through the woods. One day, while doing hoodrat stuff with my friends, we were dragging this cable through the woods, don't ask why, and it got hooked onto some old pipes sticking out of the ground. Something very hard to see in the middle of the woods is very well hidden. After poking around for an hour or 2, we find a hatch and a ladder going down a good 20 feet or so. The bottom of this tiny room has about a foot of water. We go down, and it's pitch black. We hang out in the little room, about 15 by 15, and we show our friends, and it becomes the cool, creepy spot to hang out for a week or so. One day, one of us finds there is a legit hidden door behind an old metal shelf that was rusted through. This opens up to a massive circular room. The roof had tree roots growing through it, and there were old computers on some of the walls that looked like they were from when computers were first invented. Boxes of moldy papers, and most importantly, boxes of ammo, crates of guns, which we didn't open, and grenades. There were MREs too, and dates on boxes from the 40s and 50s. Literally nobody believed us when we told our friends, so we stole grenades and called people to meet up with us in the woods to show off these grenades, and then we put them back. Some kids took some and never brought them back, which is kind of a scary thought. We brought everyone down there, hung out on the old metal tables and stuff, and it became a legit hangout spot. People left flashlights and stuff outside. We developed this plan for hiding our bikes at the trailer park itself and walking to the bunker. We later found out that the bunker connected to the coast by a long tunnel that was blocked off, which meant the tunnel ran underneath the housing area, and this is why there were only trailers in this area instead of actual houses at the time. One day, 10 of us are down there, and someone yells down the entrance to get out now. Some civilian-looking guy in a white truck. We bolted while he tried to grab us as we ran from the entrance to our bikes stashed either in the woods or back at the trailers. The next day, the entrance was filled in with dirt. Maybe a year ago, a couple friends and I explored an abandoned school that was set to be demolished a couple months later. 3 of us went inside the school, while 2 of our friends were scouting outside. There wasn't really a way to get in, so we went to the back and threw a couple apples from a nearby apple tree at a window. Since we didn't want to cut ourselves from climbing in, we grabbed a nearby pull-down canvas curtain and laid it over the broken glass. Inside, there wasn't really much. It was a little dark, there were fallen ceiling panels, old chairs and desks, etc. We walked around for quite a while until we went up this old metal spiral staircase that led to a small room. At the top, through a large metal door, there was another small room with a bunch of pipes. In the corner, there was a sleeping bag, plates, and eating utensils. After we realized that there were people squatting here, we decided to leave because we didn't want to bother anybody or be bothered by anyone else. As we were walking out through the dank, moldy passages, we heard a small noise coming from the end of a hallway. We stopped for a moment, and a couple seconds later a large crash was heard, so we promptly bolted to a nearby classroom with a bathroom and hid in the stall. We stayed there, as silent as possible, for about 5 minutes. We left the bathroom, but again we heard another noise and ducked into a nearby closet for another agonizing 5 minutes. Finally, we crept out of the closet. We were scared to leave the classroom, so we hung out there for a brief moment to build up some courage to leave. However, something caught my friend's eye. He carefully peered out the window and almost immediately ducked down. Outside, there were 2 police cars. We don't really know why they were there, but we sprinted away without hesitation. We didn't even care about the noises we heard earlier, we just ran all the way to the main entrance and crashed through. When we got out, we had to run across a very busy street to meet our friends outside, who were also running. All of us met at one of their houses and talked about what just happened. It was a pretty awesome but scary experience. Probably the time I went into Greyfriar Kirk's graveyard at 3 a.m. For anyone not familiar with this place, it has been featured on Scariest Places on Earth and is supposedly one of the most haunted places in the world. Underneath this graveyard are mass graves filled with men, women, and children from when England invaded Scotland and killed anyone who would not swear fealty to the King of England. This is also the location where J.K. Rowling got many names for Harry Potter characters, including Tom Riddle. I also have probably one of the best ghost pictures I have ever taken from this cemetery, and in another thread, many people got upset because I wouldn't post it because it is so special to me. Anyway, back to the story. Me in the cemetery with my sister at 3a.m. Come to a padlocked area, somehow squeeze between the top of the gate, and get into the area. I walk around and get to the middle of the area, and all of a sudden it feels like electricity is going through my body, and I get a weird feeling coming from my left. Look to the left, and there is a crypt with an open door. I feel a sense of dread like I have never felt in my entire life. Don't mention anything so as not to scare my sister when she, out of nowhere, goes, "Do you feel that?" It feels like energy is coursing through my body. Try to use the phone to shine a line inside so I can take a picture, the phone dies out of nowhere. Ask to use my sister's phone as she hands it to me, it dies as well. I've never jumped out of an area so fast in my entire life. Get home to research that area of the graveyard. Find out it is padlocked because there is a poltergeist in that area and it has attacked numerous people, so it is closed off to the public. Find out that the exact crypt where we both felt that weird feeling is the exact crypt of a supposed poltergeist. Oh, and also, both phones turned back on with full batteries after leaving that area. Then there was the park in my city where the underwear man lived. He was an urban legend in my city for years. The first time I heard the story, I thought it was a joke, until many experiences with the underwear man later. One time he chased me and my friends across the park in the middle of the night, scaring the bejesus out of us. One of my friends lost his shoe and left it, he was so scared. A local pastime in my city was to go underwear man hunting, where you try and find him. Years later, the legend is confirmed when a local man is arrested in his underwear. Under questioning, he details that his wife is mentally challenged and he has been running around in underwear for years scaring people. He would jump out into the light once in a while, slap his stomach a bunch of times, and take off. I have chased him many times, but he always seems to disappear into nothing. I had 2 creepy moments on the same trip once. A while back in New Orleans, I went in to explore and photograph the old abandoned Market Street power plant on Tchoupitoulas. I went in solo, which is stupid, don't solo explore abandoned industrial stuff, but I met up with a 2-person group who happened to have the same idea that day. We grouped up and split off periodically, they wound up climbing the outside smokestacks. I still regret not doing that, but once while we were separated, I wandered into what must have been the administrative or office building. I called out a few times as I was walking around because it seemed like it would be a nice place to crash if you were homeless. Completely silent, carpeted, so no footstep sounds, etc. The last time I called out, there was a huge thump and a crash from the other side of the wall I was standing next to, like someone had kicked over some office furniture. Scared the bejesus out of me, so I very quietly noped back to the machinery parts of the building. The second, and really the most horrifying part, was while I was walking solo around one of the upper levels. They were gradually dismantling the place, or trying to. New Orleans isn't the most organized place in the world, so there was a half-assed effort to restrict entry to some areas. Caution tape, rusty temporary barriers, etc., which of course none of us paid any attention to. I'm up on a dimly lit, half-sunlight filtered through old, high-up factory windows, suspended platform, a metal grid of 6'X3 rectangles, 3 floors over complete blackness, when I realized that 2 or 3 of the rectangle grids just weren't there. Removed or rusted through, maybe? One wrong step, and I would have been pretty much dead. I've got some great photos, but I'm smarter about urban exploration these days. This is my husband's story, but he's told it to me so often that I'm pretty sure I can remember all the details. His friend's mom had a really shitty house she was renting out, and one day he heard her complaining that their tenant had ghosted in the middle of the night without paying rent. She was pissed and decided to just tear it down and sell the land because it was too much trouble, so the house sat empty for a few months. One night my husband and his friends were fucking around being teenagers, and they decided to sneak into that house and explore. They were going around looking in all the rooms, trying to see if the people had left anything behind, but every single closet, cabinet, and drawer was empty. Except for one room. They had left all of their baby daughter's clothes, toys, furniture, and even baby pictures. He said it was so weird because every other room was stripped bare, but this room looked like a room in a regular house. It was so creepy. The clothes were still hanging in the closet, and there were stuffed animals in the crib, but the rest of the house was completely empty. They never told his friend's mom, and she sold the land right after. The house was torn down years ago, but it still freaks him out, and he wonders if the family ran off because they killed their daughter, either accidentally or on purpose, and she's buried somewhere in the woods. I was once hiking in the La Plata Mountains of Colorado with my dog and found an old mining camp near a saddle between 2 peaks. I went to check it out and saw that it was your average abandoned log cabin and mining camp with rusted equipment all around. Later, after summiting one of the peaks, I descended back to the saddle. It was getting dark already, and it would have taken another 6 hours to get to my car, so I decided to spend the night in the living room of the cabin. That night, a monstrous thunderstorm rolled in. Rats took up roost beneath the warped floorboards and kept me awake with their scratching. As rain dumped from the sky, lightning eerily flooded the empty rooms of the cabin. All was well, though, when suddenly I thought I saw the shadow of a man in an adjacent room. I was instantly upright and alert. I searched the black, waiting for another lightning flash. But when it came, the figure was gone, as was my dog. I called for him, but he did not come. The storm and the night made it impossible to go searching. Worried and frightened, I huddled in the cabin with my back to a corner. I must have dozed off because the next thing I remember is waking up in the morning. The air was damp, and the ground outside was muddy. I searched the cabin once more and saw no sign of the man or my dog. When I stepped outside, I saw boot prints all around the entrance to the mine and the window to that adjacent room. Someone had definitely been there. Just then, my dog came trotting up from out of nowhere. He had scratches all over his legs and some large bones in his mouth. To his dismay, I discarded the bone, and we left in a hurry. While the scenery in that area is beautiful, I will never return to that place again. I found a corpse. I didn't see it, and I didn't need to know it was there. I don't know if it was a person, an animal, or what. It was an old cement pipe manufacturing plant. Had been shut down for, I don't know, 5 to 10 years or so. It was really odd, though. The place was abandoned, not like a business that had shut down, but like when you find areas like Chernobyl, where people left everything behind and just left. Bikes are still chained up, lunch is still in the baskets, but the tires are now flat, and rust is on the frames. All of the lockers still had people's stuff in them. Changes of clothes, books, more lunch, random shite. The offices still had everything in them except the equipment like computers and chairs and stuff, but that was a single small, 1,200 square feet, building from the entire site, which was about 4 square blocks in size. So, the place was already creepy enough. I'm wandering around out there, and I go near these raised platforms with large storage containers beneath them sunk deep into the ground. These things had to be at least 12 feet deep from the top, with about 8 feet of that underground, and they were filled with gravel, so they could have easily been much deeper. The first one was normal. The second one? Well, first, there was the smell. I grew up in a semi-rural area where people occasionally dump slaughtered animals on the side of the road because they are inconsiderate sacks of shit. A goat, sheep, or whatever that's wrapped in a carpet with no skin and left in the sun for a week gets a particular sickly sweet, disgusting odor, and I smelled that same odor coming from that second pit. I kept approaching it, but as I got closer, I started to notice a steady hum. Which, in turn, made me aware of how fucking quiet the whole place was, except for there near that pit. I was about 5 feet from the hatch when I realized it was the sound of flies. Fucking hundreds of flies, swarming whatever was making that smell. I left. I'll be the first to admit that I have near suicidal curiosity and an inadequate sense of fear and danger, but I got the fuck out of there. Could be a coyote, stray dog, raccoon, or something else that fell in the hatch and couldn't get out and died. It sounded like a lot of fucking flies, though, and the area has both gang, drug, and homeless problems, and any of the three could have resulted in a dead body down there. I was 16 and working at Target at the time. Recently, a new guy was hired, and he was a bit older than me, maybe 20. He was a bit eccentric and told me about an abandoned asylum he'd been to before. He invited me and a few of his buddies to explore, and the temptation was that it was to be torn down soon. I am a pretty optimistic person who doesn't scare easily, so I thought this might be a good opportunity to test myself, and being 16 years old, I didn't have the best judgment. He picked me up around midnight with 2 other guys, and as we drove to the asylum, I got acquainted with his friends. We parked across the street at a vet clinic and had a little bit of a hike to the asylum. We were a few hundred yards away when we spotted someone patrolling the place. We waited for the patrolman to move on, and we walked up to one side. This place was massive, I could be wrong, but it seemed to have occupied over 100 acres. When we got up to the entrance, there was graffiti, asbestos warnings, broken glass, and plastic covering every doorway and window. Once we cut our way in, we walked around a bit. It was very dark, and only some of us had tiny flashlights. Everything was trashed inside. There were several padded rooms with heavy metal doors, a kitchen that had a foot or so of water in it, and many halls and corridors. We must have been in there for at least an hour. Spray paint cans and graffiti were all over the place. After a while, my coworker said we needed to go down to the basement, where there was some sort of pool. We wandered around for a while looking for a way to get to the basement, with my coworker leading and myself in the back. We never heard any strange voices or wheelchairs rolling around, but there was one time when we walked past a few cans of spray paint, and I, being the last person, could see that no one in front of me had touched them. Well, after we all got about 5 feet past the cans, I heard one of the cans fall and roll across the ground behind me. Everyone froze. I turned around with the flashlight and could see the can rolling across the ground until it came to a stop. I shined the flashlight around the hall and didn't see anyone there. We kept moving, and I walked backwards for a bit and never saw anything. We came to a portion of the hallway that had been demolished. We were about 3 stories up, and most of the hospital in front of us has been torn down with the heavy equipment nearby. We had to turn back. We somehow managed to find the entrance we used after about 20 minutes of walking back. Nothing ever happened, But that can still creep me out as I know that none of the guys in front of me touched it. There was zero airflow through the hospital, and I was several feet from the wall.